All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 1:02 p.m. and acknowledge with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish, whose people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding the Huelaham Bowen Island. Welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting of Monday, February 26, 2024. And thank you for joining either in person or online. I'm Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the Chair of this meeting. I'd like to start, as I usually do, by introducing the other elected members of Council today. And I will go on my far right here. We have Councillor Sue Ellen Fast, as well as Islands Trustee Sue Ellen Fast, Councillor and Islands Trustee Judy Getty. On my far left, we have Councillor John Saunders. His right is Councillor Tim Wake. And to his right is Councillor Alison Morse. Okay. And I just got word that Councillor Alex Jurgensen has also just joined us by Zoom, so you'll see him on the screen as well. We are also joined by several members of our professional staff team here this afternoon. And for those who regularly watch these meetings might notice a change here at the head of the table. We have our corporate officer, Hope Dallas, who has returned from leave and will be joining us now at the table here. Definitely. So thank you and welcome back, Ms. Dallas. And also, I think a very special thanks needs to go to our interim corporate officer, Sophie Idsinga, who filled the role, and just a tremendous amount of gratitude for stepping up. Sophie saw this new council through its first year in office, has been tremendously helpful, and has been an absolute joy of professionalism to work with. So thank you, Sophie. And then also in the corporate services role, we did have another person step up. We had Janet step up to do the communications role and look after some of the things that Sophie was looking after. So even though she's not here today, I would just like to put it in the permanent record that we are very grateful and thank her for her services. The other change at the table today is usually in this empty chair to my right is our Chief Administrative Officer, Liam Edwards, who is joining us by Zoom today. He is not feeling so well. I'm told it's not COVID related, but we wish him a speedy recovery and thank you for being here as well. This meeting is being recorded, so when members of the public speak during the public comment or question and answer portion of the meeting, your presence and voice will be included in the permanent recording, which will be available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca and is also available live and direct and in perpetuity on our YouTube channel. And the agenda and full council package for this meeting, if you are following along in the audience or online, is available on our website at bowenislandmunicipality.ca. This council meeting is an official forum for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our community. We are all very passionate about what happens here. And I'd encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and to direct comments for council during the public comment or the question and answer period to myself. And with that, I will just look to the corporate officer for the introduction of any late items this afternoon.
There are none.
No late items this afternoon. And with that, I will look to council for a motion to approve the agenda for the February 2026 meeting. Councillor Wake was first out of the gate, seconded by Councillor Fast. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that carries unanimously. Moving on to public comments, I'll look to our corporate officer for any public comments today.
I believe there are none.
There are no public comments today. I got a confirmation from staff as well, which is new for us. So I guess we'll just move on to delegations. And we have a delegation today from Dr. Alex Choi, the Medical Health Officer at Vancouver Coastal Health, regarding our water systems here on Bowen Island. So Dr. Choi, if you wanted to join us up front here. I believe we have a presentation that will be pulled up on screen.
I'm just going to ask two of our drinking water officers and specialists here as well.
Sure. Yeah, feel free to come on up. We can have staff grab another seat as well. And so this is a delegation. We invited Vancouver Coastal Health here and their representatives just to give us an update on our water systems and to understand a little bit about what's happening from the Vancouver Coastal Health side. So thank you so much for being here today. The time to make the trip to Bowen on a sunny day. And whenever you're ready to start, generally about 15 minutes, including questions. We haven't had public comments today, so we do have some time and we can flex that as needed.
Thanks so much, Bishop. Do we have the PowerPoint?
Sorry, just receiving it.
Okay, all right. So why don't we start with some introductions first? We have at the table today some of our drinking water team. My name is Dr. Alex Choi, and I am your medical health officer. Within BCH, we have a team of folks who helps us with drinking water, and some of them are here today. This is, Bill, would you like to do so?
I'm Phil Muirhead. I'm the Regional Drinking Water Safety Officer for Coastal Health. I'm a Drinking Water Officer.
I'm Ross Adamson. I'm an environmental health officer on Bowen Island, as well as a drinking water officer.
And the reason we wanted to come today, and we know that you've been hearing from your staff about the drinking water system, particularly what prompted us to come here today with some of the recent updates around the Cove Bay system. But we do have, some larger, broader comments as well. We do plan for this to be the beginning of a conversation, as it were, about what we're going to be doing with Bowen and the drinking water system. But we wanted to start off with a bit of an overview of the system and how the regulations have changed over the years. Before we start, I do want to acknowledge that we at BCH do provide services on the traditional unceded territories of 14 different First Nations and are very, very grateful for their stewardship since time immemorial. Next slide. So in terms of what we're going to be talking about today, I know that we've had some time where we haven't come to meet you in council chambers. Thank you so much for having us today. We have a few things we wanted to outline because there have been updates since the last time that we spoke. I know, I met some of you, but not all of you. So I'm really glad to meet you here today. And so we just wanted to go over, first of all, the legislation. We at BCH, as you know, are not the folks who are responsible for all parts of the drinking water system. We have a very specific responsibility, and so we're going to go over some of the legislation that we work with today. We're then going to talk about treatment objective guidelines and treatment credit guidelines. So basically some of the guidelines that we use to see whether or not a water system is performing at a level that we believe to be safe for the public. We are then going to talk about some of the water systems here on the island. And then we're going to talk about some of the challenges and ongoing considerations. Again, this brings me back to why we are here today and what prompted us to come here at this particular time, which really is around Cove Bay and some of the actions that we might need to consider as we're looking at the ongoing challenges that we're having with the system. So with that, I'm going to turn it over first to Phil.
Right. I'm just going to go over some of the background stuff or a little overview stuff so we all know what we're talking about when we mention these things throughout the presentation. So the first thing is regarding legislation on water systems. The two key pieces of legislation that Ross and myself and Dr. work with is the Drinking Water Protection Act and the Drinking Water Protection Regulation. There's other pieces of acts and regulations that are covering other parts of aspects of water, but those are the two main ones because anything that define a water system is basically two or more connections. And so we have a lot of them on the system and on the island, and there's quite a few that are just under control of Bowen Island municipality. So I guess the next slide. The treatment objective guidelines. So if you actually go and look at the act and the regulation, it talks about surface water needing to be disinfected and treated, but it doesn't actually tell you what that means. And so we have a number of guidelines. One is for surface water treatment objectives and one is for groundwater treatment objectives. And these are the ones, they're called guidelines, but they're basically set in stone, when it talks about the minimum amount that we need. And these things have been evolved from decades with the EPA and other agencies that deal with water, and they've been adopted here in the province as our guidelines. And so when we talk about requirements, it's all termed in the word log credits. And log credits is just a reduction. And it's a little thing there. Every time you want to know how many logs you're dealing with, you just count the number of 9. So 90% is 1 log, 99% is 2 log, and so forth. So we start hearing these numbers 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And what we're referring to there is a 4 log reduction of viruses. And it's a 3 log reduction of cysts, which is your Giardia, beaver fever, cryptosporidium. Those are 3. And then the other things we talk about 2 forms of treatment. And then we have 1 NTU, which is a form of turbidity, and then 0 detectable coliform, which is your bacteria that we test for. That's an indicator organism as a test organism. We don't test for everything that could possibly be in your water, other than maybe doing special tests for GRD and crypto. And so these are the minimum standards, and they're based on your source water being of a certain quality. Of course, if your source water is worse, then these numbers have to go up. But for the most part, what we've agreed on is like the 4321 is for it. For surface water, that's a standard treatment. When you're getting into groundwater, groundwater has basically been divided into 3 different levels. We call one GARP, which is groundwater at risk of pathogens. And that's basically saying it's not really that much different than surface water. So you can imagine somebody digging a 10-foot pit in their backyard and it fills up with water and they call that a well. And you throw a big piece of plywood on it, it doesn't have a lot of protection. So that's basically treatment standards are going to be the same as if you're pulling it out of a creek or a lake. Then we have the one where it's called GARP for viruses. So it's got some treatment that's going on, like some of the bigger pieces. Your GRD and crypto are getting held up in the soils, but the viruses can still possibly transfer through the soil, being smaller, having longer lifespans, and well, actually not even living, right? So they just basically make their way through. So they're viable for a lot longer time. And they also make people sick at a much lower number. So we can have that middle of the road one. And for those numbers there, we still require, of course, the 4 log reduction for viruses, but you get credit for not having to treat for the cysts and crypto and Giardia. And then the last one is our low risk. And that's basically you've got good protected groundwater and it can come out of the ground and it doesn't need any further treatment, providing it's got the right turbidity. It doesn't have too much turbidity in the water. Of course, that's the water as it's coming out of the source. Once you put it into distribution, there might be some need for secondary treatment at that point to make sure that the water remains potable, depending on the type of system and how long your runs are, things like that. So next slide. And so that's the minimum standard for what's required. How you reach that standard is also we have treatment guidelines. There's another document, and these documents are contained within the Drinking Water Officers Guide that we all use as drinking water officers. It's our key piece it's a document that we all go to try to interpret our acts and regulations. And in there, they've got treatment credit guidelines. So it basically lists every type of treatment and what the normal level of credit is for using that type of treatment. And the whole idea is you just line up and just list down all the forms of treatment you have, and you get credit for each one. And when you add them all up, credit that you have needs to exceed the minimum amount. Basically, yeah. So there's a whole bunch of different levels for different types of treatment, and this is why Cove Bay has multiple levels of treatment. And you've got with the ceramic filters as well as not ultraviolet, but you have filtration of that. You have your chlorination. They all get credits for doing different things. I think that's it now, isn't it? We turn it over to you.
Sure.
Next slide.
Okay, thank you, Phil. So today, my role in this presentation is really just to give a brief update on the municipal water systems on Bowen Island. Bowen Island has 7 municipal systems, and they're made up of systems that are supplied from surface water, so 2 systems of surface water only, groundwater, 3 systems that are groundwater only, and then there's 2 systems that have a mix of surface and groundwater. So I'll now just briefly discuss each of these systems and specifically discuss how treatment objectives are being met. So yeah, starting off on the east side of the island, we have Hood Point, Eagle Cliff, and Cove Bay. And starting with Hood Point. So this surface water system supplied from Honeymoon Lake has full treatment, including chlorine, UV, and filtration, and is meeting our treatment objectives for surface water. So that's really all we need to talk about really with Hood Point. It's not one of the systems that we have concerns with. Next system, Eagle Cliff water system. It provides primarily surface water from an open brook-fed reservoir, but it's also augmented by groundwater from several wells. While the water does receive some chlorination and UV, the surface water does have higher turbidity at times. And turbidity is really a measure of the cloudiness of the water, small particles, organic matter, that kind of thing that get into the water. And higher turbidity levels can interfere with water treatment and can be an indicator of potential presence of human pathogens, which can cause illness. Arsenic is also present in the groundwater in this system, but treatment is in place and it's effective. There are major concerns with adequate supply of water for this system. And, obviously treatment objectives for surface water aren't being met, sometimes due to the high turbidity and lack of filtration. It should also be noted that there have been drinking water advisories on this system in the past. They've been resolved. There was several years ago, I believe, when the UV system wasn't working properly, but it has been resolved. So the good news is the proposed connection to the new Cove Bay water treatment plant will bring the system into compliance once that new water treatment plant has been commissioned. Next system, Cove Bay. This is the largest water system on Bowen Island, serving more than 650 residential and commercial properties. Supplied by surface water from Grafton Lake. As is common knowledge, this system has challenges. It only provides chlorination. There's no secondary form of treatment. No treatment for parasites or cysts, and turbidity is often high for long periods of time. As a result, this system does not meet the treatment objectives for surface water. Therefore, the system also operates on a continuous drinking water notice for people with compromised immune systems. And a further drinking water notice is now also in place during times when elevated turbidity is detected in the system. So the new water treatment plant with the filtration is designed to produce water that meets all of the treatment objectives. So that will resolve all of these issues, and we just needed to get going, get it commissioned. Next, we can move on to the west side systems. So on the west side, we have Blue Water Park, Bowen Bay, King Edward Bay, and Tunstall Bay water systems. So Blue Water Park, Bowen Bay, and King Edward Bay, currently are technically three separate systems, and they're supplying water from a series of groundwater wells. There are various levels of treatment throughout these systems. Some have no treatment. Others have some chlorine, and some others have full chlorination and UV as well. So while there's no immediate risk identified, we are in the process of getting groundwater risk pathogen assessments completed, or that actually I think have already been completed mostly. And really it's to assess the risk out of these groundwater sources. So it hasn't really been done as far as I know in the past. In the past, I think we would look at wells as being a safer source, which in general they are, compared to surface waters, and that was often the extent of the assessment. So the results of the GARP assessments are currently being reviewed to determine risk rating, which will determine if treatment objectives are being achieved. And potential treatment upgrades may be required depending on the results of the assessments. So the real concern on this side of the island is water quantity, and a project to connect these three systems is underway and should hopefully address this concern. And Tunstall Bay water system primarily supplies groundwater from a number of wells, but it's also augmented by one surface water source out of Explosives Creek. So the water from the surface source receives chlorine, UV, and filtration, and is meeting our treatment objectives 43210. Water from some of the wells receives some chlorine only, but other, some of the deeper wells are still untreated. So similar to the west side systems, GARP assessments have been completed and results are being reviewed to determine kind of next steps, what treatment may or may not be required. Next slide. So this slide shows just a summary sort of the municipal water systems and their status in terms of meeting the treatment objectives. So the question mark, means at this time, we don't have enough information to really determine if it's meeting. And there's quite a few question marks on there, but the good news is where there's a question mark, I think we're actively working to answer that question. Working in the right direction. And, obviously the X's objectives aren't being met. Bay and Eagle Cliff, but as I mentioned, it would be resolved once the new water treatment plant is commissioned. And that's all I have to say for my side of the updates, and I'll pass it back to Dr. Choi.
Why don't we flip back to the last slide? I just want to look at this for a second, because, just in really summary of what we've been saying here. So, we had Phil going through what are the treatment objectives, and Ross going through whether or not we're meeting them. You can see that there are some areas where we currently have a concern. And, to be honest, many of these concerns would have been ameliorated or eliminated with the new filtration plant that was supposed to go into Cove Bay. So when we look at, Hood Point, we're great there. We're meeting 43210, as you can see on your screens, no problem there. Eagle Cliff, we do have potentially a concern, which would have been fixed by connecting to Cove Bay. But Cove Bay, we currently have multiple areas of concern where we are not actually meeting treatment objectives. And as we are experiencing delays, this becomes more and more concerning to us. As all of you know, within BCH, our role is really to look at whether there are public health risks inherent in the current water system, bring that to all of you, and potentially put on some additional measures to mitigate those risks. And, I think that's why we're coming here today, because we are suspecting that if we continue to have further delays, we are going to need to take action. We do have some water systems where there are assessments ongoing to see if we're meeting treatment objectives. So, Blue Water, King Edward, Bowen, Tunstall, we may have to come back again when we have some more information to provide that to you and provide advice as to what we might need to do in terms of treatment. But we can say right now that given what we're seeing with Cove Bay, we are seeing some of the treatment objectives not being met. I do want to give full credit to this council, previous councils, and staff in the incredible amount of work that's gone into this, and particularly with the hiring of a professional engineer, incredibly important and critical to this project. But as we continue to see delays, and I think on the BCH side, we're not professional engineers. We can't say, can't make recommendations as to exactly what needs to be in the system, how things need to be solved. But what we can say is that right now, treatment objectives are not being met. And so as the population has grown, that's become more of a concern to us, because as you might be able to tell, if a water system like this one, where treatment objectives are not met, is serving 1 or 2 people, on a population level, that's less of a risk than if it's serving hundreds. And that is the situation that we're finding ourselves in today. What was once a system that was serving fewer people and posing less of a risk to health is now serving more people. And at the same time, our treatment objectives and our guidelines have changed over the years and gotten, more, they've prioritized safety to a greater degree. So now we're seeing more of a mismatch between where we need to be and where we currently are. As a result of that, there are a few things that we will likely be talking to staff about and be talking to you about in the coming months. This is particularly if there continues to be delays with the filtration system at Cove Bay. These things could include things such as increased monitoring, and we are in discussions with staff right now as to how that could happen and how could that come online. Increased notifications. So as all of you know, we have that ongoing notification that has been on for many years that warns people with immunocompromised that they need to boil their water. But it is possible that if the current situation continues, that we might need to expand that. So for instance, there is quite a lot of tourism on the island, folks who come over from elsewhere to stay on island. And some of them may not be informed because they don't, they're not able to read the undercurrent. They don't know that it's on the website. And so notification of those folks might be one of the things that's required. Another thing that could have implications is the permits that we would be allowing. With permits being issued conditional upon the completion of a filtration system that has been commissioned. So, if we flip to the next slide now, we do have a number of concerns, but this is really what it comes down to. We have a water system that has been like this for many years, and we recognize that, but the population has grown. And our treatment objectives have modernized, and there is a growing gap between these two things, which has led us as VCH to have more concerns, which is why we're coming here to you today. There are some other ones on this list that have to do with that. So, population growth is obviously part of it, because again, the more people you have, the potential greater the risk, because you just have more people at risk from the system. There are also some structural things that I have to admit, I think could be a challenge to actually solving some of these issues. So the governance system, just to be completely honest, of the water systems of Bowen Island is more complex than we typically see. And the funding model is somewhat more complex than we typically see. And in my personal opinion, and again, this is my opinion, but typically with water systems, we see funding available for ongoing capital improvements. Because water, costs money, and maintaining a good water system costs money. Maintaining this kind of infrastructure for this kind of population growth costs money. And so, in order to maintain sufficient treatment capacity, sufficient quality, there does need to be ongoing investments. There are also parts of the island, and Ross mentioned these, that do have limited water supply, and that's going to be another issue that we would like to flag. Again, our role within this, we're flagging some of these risks, and our tools would be things like notifications, requiring more monitoring, as well as some of the permits. Those would be some of the tools that we might be discussing. We haven't arrived at the final plan yet. We would like to do that in conjunction with your staff, in discussion with you. But we wanted to have this conversation to let you know that it is there, the concern is there, and we would like to start having these conversations with you. With that, I think that's all we have prepared for our presentation, but we're very happy to take questions. As I said at the beginning, I do view this as sort of the beginning of a conversation. These are ongoing things that we're going to have to work together on. But we would like to really work collaboratively with you at every step of the way. And, we've already been speaking with staff and are very thankful to Liam and Patrick and others for their incredible work. This is a very complex issue that's been inherited. But I'm confident that working together, we can come up with something that works.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. We'll take questions in a minute. Just possibly a first one, because I know that there will be members of the public watching this as water issues on Bowen continue to percolate up into public consciousness. And I was wondering if just before we get into questions and discussion, whether you can comment more specifically on VCH's role in water systems vis-a-vis, what a municipality has. I would just hate the public to think that VCH runs the water systems and then you're ultimately responsible. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to get out ahead of that one.
Thank you, Marilyn. I think that's an excellent point. And I tried to sort of flag in the presentation, but I think it is very complex because, as you know, with water, there's many different folks involved. So, for instance, if you're going to look at the licenses to take water for, commercial purposes, for instance, that's a completely different area. That really belongs to industry. We are really looking at looking at the water system from a regulatory point of view. We are not water system operators. We do not build water systems, nor do we operate water systems. What we do is we look at how those water systems are functioning and comment on the risk to public health stemming from those water systems. And then we work collaboratively with water system operators and yourselves to work on some of those issues. I don't know, Bill or Ross, would you like to add to that?
You summed it up quite well. Yeah, we're the regulatory oversight, really. We're here to kind of help you guys understand what the requirements on the act and the regulations that are placed on all water systems and how to move towards that and sort of keep that process going towards. And it's also we've had lots of experience with other water systems and these things, so we can sometimes give advice on certain things, but we don't make the choices of what type of system goes in. Like Alex said, we don't design systems. We don't say, thou must put this in. All we can say is you have to put treatment in to meet the treatment objectives, which piece of equipment you use to do that. And what works with your system is kind of up to the water system operators like you guys have done before. Getting an engineer on board to help out with that and oversight is kind of the best thing going for you. And then it's the ongoing things too, like we're just making sure that things like the emergency response plans is a big thing for us right now. Making sure that we have a very robust one. So we work with you guys as well, operators, to make sure that they've looked at all aspects of their system. We said, well, with this system over here, we knew that this happened. Do you have coverage if that was to happen to your system? And that just kind of opens your eyes to maybe some things you're not aware of. That's where our expertise comes in. Helping that way.
Great. Thank you so much for that additional context. So, for anybody watching or listening, Vancouver Coastal Health is the regulatory authority that oversees some of the water systems, some of the testing, and then the municipality's role is the capital investment, the choice of the type of system, the building, the operation, and the financing. Just wanted to make that very clear so that you folks don't get a ton of letters from the public saying fix our water systems. Okay. So I'll take a list. So we have Councillor Saunders, Councillor Morse, Councillor Getty, and Councillor Fast. So starting with Councillor Saunders.
Thank you. Thanks very much for reiterating stuff that fortunately we already know. But on as well as that, I think you understand the information you gave us and the way you presented it means that you understand the sense of frustration we have because we are aware of these things and we are trying to do what we can. If you got questions, so I'll only ask one. And I think probably this would be directed at you, Mr. Muirhead. You indicated the level of turbidity in our source water is higher than we want to see, and that may be causing some of the problem. Well, it doesn't meet the reg, so it is a problem. Have you experienced it, across or any of you, I guess, across your experience, have you come across where that turbidity level could actually be contributing to the problems with getting the place commissioned, getting the, the source water, there's too much turbidity, therefore the system can't work?
Well, it's just how much levels of treatment is required, right? And then certain forms of treatment can handle certain turbidity levels. So it's knowing the NTU, and I understand you guys did do a pilot project. Maybe Ross can speak a bit more of that. But yeah, the piloting is the importance to see, and through all times of the year, we've had water systems where we've gone through like 3 years of piloting because we really wanted them to have a really nasty weather situation to know whether their system could be robust enough to handle the turbidity. And it turned out that they were going with a point of entry type system where every home had treatment. And it turned out at the scale that they're doing it was unmanageable. But does that answer your question? Or?
It's close enough because I know I can't pin you down on this under that legal opinion or anything like that. It is one of the issues we're facing though is, what is the plant at fault because it's faulty equipment or because our water sucks to start with or anything on those lines?
It's just the level of how much you got to treat it, right? You have to put in more and more pre-treatment.
Yes.
Right? If your filter clogs up, you put in a coarser filter to get some of the and that kind of thing.
I think you answered it though, as well as we can at this point. So.
I think this is another area where the rules become really important. Because I think, again, we're not professional engineers, we're not water system designers. So what we would not be able to comment on is whether, current issues with the plant are the fault of the manufacturer, and we're not able to comment on that.
And that's what I was trying to comment.
Unfortunately. What we can comment on is the different types of treatment that we would require as the regulator for different types of turbidity and different types of notification we require for turbidity. But I know that's kind of like, it's not exactly what the question is.
You've done the best you can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Morse.
I've got 4. So looking at the treatment objective guidelines, just so I understand, the minimum treatment objectives, so log reduction of viruses. So you want to see 99.99% of the viruses removed from the water. Is that
That's what
treatment
it means.
objective is?
Yeah,
Okay,
providing that your source water is at a certain level, and that's another document that's out there. It's source water guidelines. It's by Ministry of Environment for drinking water.
so then the next question is, how do you know that those treatment objectives have been met or not met? Is that the weekly samples that go into the Vancouver Coastal Health Lab, or how did?
It's putting in equipment that's been validated and some known log reduction stuff. So every piece, like, chlorination is given a certain amount of credit if it's done a certain way. And so what we make sure is that you're monitoring all the little checks to ensure that the treatment's working, not the end of the line. Because if you're just waiting for something to show up
at
in
the end
a
of the
test
line?
model, you're not actually looking at all the risks that your system could be open to, right? We want to make sure every stage of the way, there is a way to monitor to know that that equipment is working right every single day. Because your
Monitoring
water
it.
test is telling you don't drink the water from 2 days ago.
Yeah.
It doesn't really help the population. It does help show that maybe there's something going on in the distribution system, but we want to make sure that every step in the treatment has got steps that you can monitor and check and have your operators look at it every day. And then Ross, in his role as a drinking water officer, will come in and say, let's look at your test, your log sheets from the last few months since I've been here. And you'll look for areas where there might be some dips or things have gone abnormal, and ask why they were, and what was the action that went on at that point.
Okay. So the next question is, relates to water supply. Some of the, systems are on wells, and they're sharing an aquifer with a whole bunch of individual wells at private houses. So we have no idea how much water those wells are drawing out of the aquifer. Now, is there any way, so we can't necessarily test the whole aquifer recharge, if I'm understanding things correctly. So is there any way that you people can require private well people to put meters in, or advise how much?
That's under a whole different water branch. And I mean,
So we need to bug them.
there is aquifers there's places that people do monitor aquifers. There is groundwater specialists in waterland and resource sectors, or resource stewardship ministry, and maybe even Ministry of Environment are out there. And there's a whole well log too. The only way that you're going to get every well known is you might have to do a survey in that community to understand what people's wells are, and do it under the premises like you're here to try to understand how much water is being used in your community to try to figure out water balancing. It would be a good extra thing to do if you're unsure of it, because registration of wells, while it's required now, wasn't really a requirement before 2016. It was more of a
I think
voluntary.
we know where all the wells are. It's just we don't have any idea whether they're
There
using
is a whole mapping system.
200 gallons a day or 500 gallons a day sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, and then my next question is, the GARP assessments, I assume we're doing those.
Yes, that's a requirement for your folk to look at, and that's to answer all those question marks.
Because we're just in the budget process for the water systems for this coming year. So if there's money needing to be spent, we need to know quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it can make a huge difference between, the cost between a GARP and a GARP virus well can be quite a bit, because you're not having to look after a lot and put a lot more treatment in. So it sort of pays off in the long run. First of all, it answers your questions, whether at what level risk is there. But if you can get a hydrologist to show that it's just for viruses, you can save quite a bit of money on the treatment later on.
And I guess my last question is, as you know, there's lots of private systems on the island. And they have to follow the same rules that you've displayed here.
Depends when we're speaking of private, are you talking about community systems that are?
Well, like
private, or
Town Point Utility, for example, is a very large
Utility, yeah.
utility, and then there's a bunch of smaller systems that, would have 20, 30 users.
Correct,
that
yeah,
are
it
run
would be
by-
following the same.
And everybody has to be licensed by you people, right?
No,
It does depend on the size of the water system. So as Phil was saying, 2 or more. There are some water systems, there are some sources, for instance, that are just used by one property, or one user with one connection, and those would not be.
Yeah.
But as you were saying, like many of them would be under our.
there's 3 things that come with well. One is registration. That's somebody who drills a well, registers a well. It puts your pinpoints you on a map that everybody can go to, and it can say there's a well here. The next one is was going to be licensing. So if you're needing it for certain situations other than for residential use, it would need to have a license, and that's given by Walrus, the Ministry of Water, Lands and Resource Stewardship. And then in certain situations, if it's now a system that's serving a lot of people, then you need a permit. That's what we issue is the operation permit.
And same applies for surface water.
Surface water they wouldn't do the registration, they would need the license, and they would need the permitting part, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris, Councillor Getty, Councillor Fast, and Councillor Jurgensen.
Thank you for your presentation. It's, I think, really important for my understanding, and I think several other people. I'm on the Cove Bay water system, and when you say that, if there's more delays and it doesn't fulfill what we're expecting eventually, then what you're going to have to take action. So what would those steps be? I mean, we should be putting out a notice. It's got 3 X's across that chart.
That's right. So I would say that there's maybe 3 different areas where we're thinking about taking action right now. One is extending the notifications. So we have that notification that's on the municipality website that tells folks about the need to boil your water if you are immunocompromised. Same goes out in the undercurrent, but I think what we'd be saying is that if there are further delays, which to be honest, this is not a 6 months from now thing. This is something that we're going to start talking to staff about right now. This would be extending those notifications, maybe requiring that folks who are who have Airbnbs, who are renting out their spaces, that they would need to have this sort of notification in their space. Perhaps putting something near the ferry terminals, more public notifications so that people would be able to see them more readily. And in times of greater turbidity, extending those notifications to encompass other groups, not just those who are immunocompromised. Most extreme version of this obviously would be a boil water notice on the entire system. But I don't think we would get there quite yet. We would be looking at sort of a curated kind of approach based on the risks that we see in the system. So that's number 1, the notifications. Number 2 would be requiring increased testing. So for instance, right now, if we're looking at commissioning a different system, one that encompasses the tank but not the filtration plant, that allows us to do more real-time monitoring of the system for things like turbidity. And so that might be the second group of actions that we require is increased increased monitoring so that we have more tools to actually make our assessment. And that's, again, if we see increased risk, we want increased monitoring to make sure that we have a good idea of what's happening on the ground. The third area that we'd be looking at in terms of action would be potentially changing permitting. So, obviously this is an island where we've seen a lot of growth. And in order to have more connections to the existing system, we may require that you have a completed commissioned system before those connections would be allowed to occur. So, I want to be honest here. I know that would have implications for growth and development. And that's why we want to come to you early, because those are some of the things that we are considering right now. So those 3 action areas, notification, monitoring, and permitting are the 3 areas that we're currently considering. But again, this is what we'll be discussing with staff and with yourselves as time progresses.
Okay, and the Grafton Lake, that's the primary source for the Cove Bay water. So there's considerable growth that is just starting around there. Plus there's the whole island is noticing increased in tourism, and that particular lake is getting an increase in terms of recreation. So lots more people swimming. Apparently there were boats on the lake last summer. There's suggestion in terms of a parking lot being built in the south shore of it, right up against the lake. So in addition to these viruses, cysts, and turbidity, one of the things that we learned about at the last Trust Council meeting was some research that's coming out of Washington in terms of a new chemical that they're using in tires that affects salmonids. May or may not have an effect on humans. So in addition to these 3 particular major concerns, are there other substances? I've heard stories about anecdotal stuff about the chemicals that are in some of the sunscreens and, various other things. So as there's more people in the water, are there more contaminants that are not being tested for that we should be concerned about? And I'm personally quite amazed that we haven't actually, and I'm speaking a heresy here, that I'll get letters about this, but the swimming in the lake and that kind of public access. It's not just the deer and the beavers and the wildlife, but it's a quite a significant increase in the use of that lake recreationally. So are there other things that aren't being tested for that we should be paying attention to and thinking about for the future? Especially as there's more droughts, lake goes down and it's, more concentrated maybe. I'm not sure what the scientific terms would be, and more people and more attraction in terms of all the tourists coming and doing the walk around the lake and maybe having a swim and bringing their dogs and all the rest of it. Is there something that we should, are there things that we're not paying attention to that we should start to?
Yeah, great question. So there's a few things in there. I think, so first of all, when we talk about these requirements, those are not the only things that are tested, but those are some of the things that are in our guidelines. So you're absolutely right. There are new concerns that arise over time that are evaluated by usually federal authorities that let us know, what sort of chemicals or contaminants might be a new concern, and they do regular reviews on those things. So we keep track of exactly these issues. But I think that your question around source water protection is a very important one. I think there are definitely areas where the drinking water source is used for recreational purposes as well. But you're right. I think that's one of the things that we can also take a look at. So, source water protection. If, and you're on the ground, best. And if you're saying that, source water may not be as protected as it was in the past, that is something that we'd want to take a look at as well. And so we can definitely discuss that with staff. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think you got it right. Yeah, what we do the 43210 is the disinfection. That's referring to biological stuff, but the guidelines for Canadian drinking water quality applies all across Canada. It is our go-to book that lists every type of thing that could be in the water, a lot of chemicals as well as just general chemistry. There's two different things. Chemistry is all your things that you normally find in water, whatever levels it is, and then you have all the other stuff that you look for, like arsenics, which is not as big of an issue for surface water, but as Ross has pointed out, there is a lot of wells around that do have to go for that level of treatment. So yeah, that is another level of treatment. And yeah, I guess, it is going to be a balance between how many people are using the water over certain times. If there's certain things going in, it is hard to test for every chemical out there unless you very specifically look for one. And you have to go and spend a lot of money for that. I mean, we are kind of fortunate here. A lot of our water is fresh. It comes in rain, unlike other places where their water is coming out of a river, which was another town, city discharge, and you're dealing with a lot of pharmaceuticals, PFASs, which are those little forever chemicals that are showing up in some places. Unless you've had specific incidences of dumping in the area, or probably not going to be a concern for that type of water, but it is showing up more and more. And the more we look for it, and the levels are talking about like parts per trillion, we're going to be finding it everywhere too. So you have to kind of look at the balance of what's in the water and what comes out of it. And there's other forms of treatment that can help with removing some of those things too, if you find that you're getting more and more of it showing up. But specifically, yeah, I think it's just highlighting the biggest concern is going to be things like cysts and Giardia and parasites and those type of things, which elevates the need to have the water treatment happening sooner than later.
Especially with our population of little people and old people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're about to start an OCP amendment process, hopefully. So what, if any, role might we tap into in terms of Vancouver Coastal Health when we start getting into some of these future ideas in terms of water protection and possibly permitting and regulations from the municipal side of it?
So we're very happy to review OCPs and to provide input on really anything. We have a number of different types of, so happy to provide comment on things like active transportation, how we're developing healthier communities. So we definitely have members of our staff who are happy to be involved in that process. So feel free to reach out. And we will definitely assign members of our staff to help with those aspects as we receive those requests.
My last one from me. There was a
Very
letter.
last one.
There was a letter, and I simply draw it to your attention. I'm not expecting, it's very late addition to the agenda, and I don't want to blindside you with anything, but there is a letter that talks about person's experience. I don't believe it was on a system, but there were, some groundwater issues. So, Mr. Hamilton, your name is mentioned specifically. So I draw it to your attention. I'd be very interested in terms, at some point somehow, hearing comments, but in terms of just how we process some of these issues would be very helpful.
Yeah, so we did see that. I think that was the letter that was attached to the agenda package. Is that right? On page 269, was it?
And it's on our whole agenda. It's really come prepared.
But I think some of these issues are where those pieces of jurisdiction become very important. Unfortunately, it is not within our role to approve water usage. It is also not within our role to deal with dumping. That is not part of that's not part of our role. What we would deal with actually is whether or not it was impacting the quality of the complainant system. At the time, the system that was being written about was actually not in compliance. It is now being brought into compliance as a system because it does serve multiple connections. So, but that is now being done. So that is underway. And the facility that the person was complaining about is also in compliance in terms of the way that they're dealing with their gray water as well. So that has been, further updates on our side, but we are very happy to be part of those conversations over time, if that would be an interest.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fast and Councillor Jurgensen.
Thank you. Page 279.
79,
Who cares?
Yeah.
Very close. I just thank you for coming to us to talk about human safety. It's important for all of us to be thinking about. Following up from, I've just got a couple. Following up from Councillor Getty here, do you have baseline data from wells on Bowen about what chemicals or pharmaceuticals or PFE, petrochemicals, anything that's down there? Because I'm thinking with climate change, more extreme weather events, sometimes flooding, the forever fire chemicals I talk about. Is there any of these kinds of baseline data, or would you recommend that we get this? For an island, because we have really high density of wells and septic beds island-wide, some of which are in our municipal system.
Most of our community systems are required on a certain frequency to take a chemical analysis and send that in for all the chemistry. So that's, again, just your general chemistry. If there's been a specific thing like a hydrocarbon spill or something, then we've been dealing with one up in Powell River right now. It was an old site, there was a gas station. Then that's an extra level testing on top of what it is. But I know the general chemistry that's been happening. I'm going to have to be honest to say our database on that has been really poor. Because right now it's just literally just PDF documents in a file. We are in the process right now. The whole province has been working hard on it. It's the environmental health information system, and a big part of it's going to be the drinking water system, where all this information is going to be going into a common database, along with Ministry of Environment's testing information for theirs. They've got a lot of wells out there that are just measuring groundwater in certain areas. That's all going to be going into a big, massive database, which then we're going to be able to access and pull out information like that. Right now, it can be there, but it's difficult to find unless you ask for sampling at a specific well at a specific system. Then we can have to go through they're almost like paper files in a way, electronic paper files to find it. It's not coming out. It's a real query that we can pull out easily.
But some of the information can be found in the regular water reports that are published every year for a municipality.
Yeah.
So some of that testing is accessible readily for the public.
Great, thank you, because I'm just thinking cumulative over time and with the changes in not only growth and density of humans, but my second question is just about possibilities of wildfire on our our three big water towers that we think of is the mountains that have the forests on them. Wildfire or logging, industrial logging, could either of these be something that would affect the water quality? And is there suggestions from a health perspective that you would have or other things?
Yeah, so, a lot of these, to be honest, would require specific assessments. So even something like looking whether or not we need to look at a specific chemical in the water, honestly, would be a significant assessment to see, what has that land been used for, to see if we need to test for a specific chemical. And I think a lot of these are the same. But I think some of the issues that we've already flagged would be significant issues that would potentially get more severe over time, with things like climate change, the possibility of wildfires, because obviously if you have a water quantity problem, having further droughts and wildfires is not going to help that. And that's part of the reason that we're flagging some of these issues for you today, because we do suspect that over time, these may become more severe. And so we do want to make sure that we're anticipating those, because those kinds of infrastructure pieces can't be done overnight.
Thank you. I'm thinking we need the healthy forest ecosystems, and what you're saying is reinforcing that. And my question, I think, was more really about turbidity than the chemistry, and I think you answered that before, Phil. So my last question is just the timeline here. You mentioned that the guidelines have changed over the years to be safer. And I remember a couple of terms ago when we first heard from Vancouver Coastal Health, if I got this correct, that we need to have a plan to have a water treatment plant. Was that because guidelines have changed federally, or is it just that they generally incrementally were changing, or what's the timeline that we're still responding to? When did it change?
So I think it's hard to pinpoint an exact point in time because I think these things are quite incremental, and they extend over years. I guess in terms of, what level are they changing at? This is not, like a BCH change or a Bowen Island change or a North Shore change. This is something that's happened federally. The guidelines have changed over time. Even if you look at, our recreational water guidelines changed a couple of years ago. These are things that happen incrementally. And I think, part of the reason that was flagged at the time, if I remember correctly, and, I think that was 10 to 15 years ago, it was a while ago that occurred. But, my understanding is that it was a combination of the guidance has changed and the population has increased. So again, that split between where you need to be and where you are is growing because the population is increasing and the guidelines are changing. That has only continued since over the past 15 years. And, I don't think there's a hard point where we'd say that, this is the point at which it needs to change. But I think, we are getting to a point where, we're waiting for this treatment system to come online for quite a while. And now we're reaching the point, in our opinion, where we do need to take some action. So, in terms of our timelines for action, I think they are pretty much now. Like we're planning on taking action imminently as a result of a change that has happened over a prolonged period of time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Councillor Jurgensen.
Press CMD plus.
Okay, I just have one question
Press
regarding the systems
CMD plus.
that we already have, like the Allison, Councillor Morse, sorry, referred to them, the private systems. You mentioned there being a kind of a size requirement. Does that size requirement automatically come into effect when two users make a system? I know you mentioned certain systems where it's one user, one connection. It's a lot simpler. Does that automatically kick in as soon as there's two users on a system, or is it a
Looks like
higher
redundant thing.
threshold?
Zoom.
Yeah, currently at the moment, we have a situation where single family dwelling, anything other than a single family dwelling, is a water system. So you could have one connection that's serving a restaurant, that's a water system. If you have two neighbors that are sharing a well, that's a water system. If you have a person who has a primary residence and they have a coach house in the back of their yard, that is considered a water system. Are we looking for those ones that are got somebody's coach house? No, but we do come across them, and then that's why we have to bring them in compliance. Now, there has been a slight change with what we define as a single family dwelling. You can now have up to 3 rental units within the same building, providing that the primary owner is living there. So basically your in-law suites, which were technically a water system, even within the same house, because it's no longer, a single family, you're renting it off to a student or something, that would technically be a water system, which was totally unmanageable. So the province has recognized that, and they've adapted that, yeah, you can have like 3 little rental places, either short-term or long-term, within your primary residence and still have it. It doesn't carry on to the coach house. If you have a separate building off from your house, it's still at this moment going to be basically considered a water system. Now, there is a big push to change that, the recent changes with the zoning in the province where they're looking at allowing more than just a single family dwelling on a property, or actually, I think they're trying to wipe that completely off. We pointed out, well, that's going to create a water system if every time somebody puts a coach house on. So they recognize that. So there's probably going to be some change in the next few years. But of course, you're changing acts and regulations, which do take some time. But there'll probably be a time where that's going to get relaxed a little bit. It might get to the same point where you can have as long as it's on the same property, you might be able to have 1 or 2 out buildings, and it will still not be considered a water system. But for now, it is.
Audio now unmuted.
Perfect. That answers my question and then some. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the presentation as well.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen. I see our CAO with his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to extend my appreciation to Dr. Choi and the team for coming out and presenting to council. I really do appreciate all the work and support that you provide to us, and look forward to having you back when we actually commission this code-based system. And so that's something that we are all very, very anxiously awaiting. So, and I think you can appreciate that. So thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. And just a question here. So bringing us back into the scope of our own water system and what's on island and some of the pieces of the presentation here. One of the pieces I picked up on, which is around the governance and funding model of these of the water systems as they sort of stand here on the island, that I'm curious and perplexed about, given the way that we seem to have structured water governance here on the island with our 7 LSAs, since the inception of the municipality in 1999, with local advisory committees that are supposed to be neighborhood oversight into these water systems, while at the same time coming into a term of office where the cupboards are bare financially. All of our systems need work, and the money hasn't been put aside over the long term for the capital renewal and replacement, which leaves me with some very significant wonderings of how we got ourselves here and possibly what might need to change. And one of the challenges I think that municipalities face is sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees because we're so wrapped up here on our own island. So I'm just curious if you've seen, comparatively in other jurisdictions, what would be some changes to governance structures or funding models that we could perhaps make, knowing that that's not officially your purview, but given that you gave some personal opinions, I'm curious about what you've seen in other jurisdictions.
Yeah, I suppose my overall comment would be that it is unusual to have these local advisory committees and to have staff need to have these decisions be put through that. It does create just a bit of a hurdle, in order to get these things approved. I think that the fact of the matter is, for a municipality this size, you know, having good infrastructure and safe water does cost money. And so, you know, it might be a matter of how are we going to refill those cupboards so that money is available for ongoing capital investment? Because otherwise, you know, I think it's possible that we will find ourselves in this situation again. You know, all of these water systems, you know, they even after, you know, a plant is commissioned, it's going to need ongoing maintenance. And it's very challenging if that is only taken from, you know, the small group of users of that specific system. That to me feels like a very challenging environment. Typically, you know, we find, and you know, I think Mr. Edwards may have quite a lot of experience in this area as well as to how these things are structured. But, you know, I do think that there are some hurdles here that staff need to overcome in order to make changes when they have to go through individual advisory committees, when they may not have the amount of funding that they need to make these ongoing capital investments. So, you know, I think, and I recognize nothing changes overnight, but when I look at the water system, those are some of the things that jump out at me in terms of what the barriers might be going forward.
Thank you. That's helpful. And, you know, I think even just getting that into everybody's had a chance to speak. So we're gonna move on after this.
One other point, there's I don't think, Columbia Shuswap Regional District was
Yeah.
dealing with this, and I don't know if you've ever seen it, but they put together a whole guideline on how they were going to take over operations of water systems for utilities that were failing. And they basically put together a whole package on that. And they looked at, you know, the viability of it and how it was all structured and how they were taking over. And actually, they won an award at BCWA from it, I remember years ago, because it really set out how to take over a system. That's something too, like if there's other water systems on the island that are struggling that want to get, because they can't get access to funding, whereas you guys as a municipality can get funding. And so looking at that, for an island-wide, what would it mean if another water system came up and said, listen, we're struggling, could Bowen Island municipality take us over if they're willing to do that?
Right.
And have that structure set up ahead of the game. So that was a good model to look at if you ever wanted to take a look at how to structure things.
Well, I really want to thank you for taking the time to come here today and share both your thoughts and your expertise and, you know, really in a helpful and collaborative tone to ultimately work with the municipality so that we can find a resolution to having safe, clean drinking water across the island. And from my seat, I think it gives us a lot to think about, particularly as we're going into an OCP review, particularly as we find ourselves in funding stresses, as we're in this place of needing to renew all of this capital infrastructure around water, that the time, you know, is right. And maybe I'd like to signal to council a little bit that I think we're due to have a conversation about what water systems and water governance on the island looks like, about those funding models. I know that we're doing DCC work and all of that's coming down the pipes. But given the place that we find ourselves in and given the challenges that we experience with our water infrastructure and our utility infrastructure generally on the island, I think it's time to have a very serious conversation about where this goes and what it looks like for the future, so that 30 years from now, whoever's sitting in these chairs aren't dealing with the same issues. With that, thank you.
And we're welcome to come back anytime you want us.
Sure, what are you doing 2 weeks from now?
10 minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving us along on the agenda. We're at the consent agenda. Are there councillors who wish to pull items from the consent agenda? Councillor Getty?
12.2 and 12.8.
12.2, 12.8. Councillor Fast?
12.15.
Just for the sake of expedience, I'll just ask you to have a motion prepared for the disposition of that item as you pull it.
12.5, my mistake.
Which one?
12.5.
12.5, and I'm going to pull 4.5 just as there's which is the resolution to close. There's just a bit of a clerical. So maybe we'll start, and then with that, looking around the table, seeing nothing else. Councillor Wake?
Did anybody pull, sorry, I was distracted. Did anybody pull 12.9?
No. All yours. Okay, and with that, I'll look for a motion to adopt the consent agenda. Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Morse. Any discussions? None. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Audio not unmuted.
Aye. Carries unanimously. Let's deal with 4.5 first. We'll just go in numerical order around all of these. So 4.5, we have the resolution to close, but in that section B has been also added, which doesn't need to be there. So I will just move the recommendation minus section B. So just seconded.
I don't have a B.
It's in the
I can see it.
Yeah, it's just,
The B is on the right-hand side.
it's just attached in the same sentence.
it's attached in the same sentence after A.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, so moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Discussion, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Audio not
Aye. And that carries unanimously. Next up would be 12.2, Councillor Getty for your disposition.
There's 3 letters that we received from the public about development ideas and discussions that have gone on about Bowen Lodge, and they make reference that, the council is somehow involved. I can't remember the specifics that's in the letters, but I wanted to point out to people that I haven't heard anything from staff or the developers or the owners or any of the community discussions. So this has not come to council. This is something that is happening between the developers and the neighbors, I believe. But there certainly is nothing formal or informal that has come to council. So it's not where we're any dereliction of duty on our part. It's
No, and I can't speak to this. So we did, thank you for actually flagging this item, Councillor Getty. So prior to the holiday break, the owners of that property did reach out to have a meeting with myself and the CAO, where my understanding is that they presented information that felt very preliminary, with this notion that they would be talking to the community to potentially what they termed reimagine the terms of the covenant on that property. My encouragement to them, there was no agreed upon follow-up or no notion that we would bring this to council. My comments to them were substantially similar to the types of comments that are contained in the letter, that the property does have covenants on it. Those covenants are about a century old, that the property was purchased with those covenants in place. And it would really be up to them to gain the support of the community and work with their existing partners on the site to figure out a path forward. And barring that, I said I would be the pathway to success on that would be questionable without the support of the community and without the support of the stakeholders. And that's all that we've heard from them.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that,
I just had a comment with
yes.
respect to those.
The covenant was put on in not too long after we incorporated as a municipality.
Right. Sorry, I meant the length of time that that it had been in the care of CNIB, I think originally.
The length of time the CNIB.
Yeah, not the covenant. Thank you for that correction. So with that, may I perhaps a motion to receive? Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Fast. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Carries. Moving on to 12.8, 12.5, Councillor Fast. Assignments regarding the House and Community Forum.
Yes, thank you. This is a letter in our package regarding a couple of things. One of them is that she writes, we welcome the opportunity to collaborate with Bowen Island Municipality on ways to promote and reference with pride the UNESCO Biosphere designation. And we Bowen Island Municipality signed the agreement to work together. So I would like to move that council request staff to provide recommendations on ways to promote and reference with pride the UNESCO Biosphere Region designation.
Moved by Councillor Fast. Seconded by Councillor Getty. Any discussion on this? My only comments, I think that is a great request of staff. I mean, when we go to the House Sound Forum, I'm in the position of needing to represent the municipality, so we can frame our comments and frame our position statements from within that UNESCO perspective. I think that's helpful.
There was a link in that letter advising us how to get an invitation to the May meeting in Glen Eagles, and I wasn't able to find that link. Wasn't working. It hadn't been activated. So I've written to Ruth Simons and asked them to send us more information in terms of that. So I'll share that when you get it.
Great. Thank you.
I think we got an email from her.
I've received an
That I got
invitation. Okay, just to move things along, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. Councillor Getty for item 12.8, which is a letter from MP Weiler regarding the Rural Transit Solutions Fund.
I'd like to refer the letter to the Transportation Advisory Committee. We've got a meeting coming up, I believe, next week or soon. And this is something that
Looks like you're done talking, so we'll know it.
might be of interest.
Okay, so a motion to refer to the Transportation Advisory Committee. Is there a second for that motion? Second by Councillor Wake. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hands.
Aye.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Jurgensen, did you have a comment?
It wasn't about this item. I had stepped out for item 12.2 and just made it back for the beginning of 12.8.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
And was that, just to clarify, so that we're dotting our i's and crossing our t's, was that for a conflict of interest?
Yes, correct.
Depend lowered.
And what was, would you like to declare that conflict of interest? I believe that you need to state what the conflict is.
Oh, okay. I just, since I had myself had some discussions with the neighbors of the lodge property, I decided to recuse myself from Councillor Getty bringing up that, pulling that from the consent agenda.
Great, thank you.
And I have returned, and I am in favor of the question on the table.
Okay, thank you. So with that vote taken, the motion to refer to the Transportation Advisory Committee is carried unanimously. And then we are at 12.9, which is Robin Fenton regarding an update to the BIM logo. Over to you, Councillor Wick.
So this is asking the question, have we ever considered adding Nequelicum to the logo, to our logo? And I thought it was a very good question. I guess I'd like to ask it of staff. Have we ever thought of it? And if we haven't done any work on that, maybe I'll ask the question first.
Sure. I'll look to staff and Mr. Edwards, I'm looking at you through the Zoom screen here.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. My understanding is that we've never contemplated adding that Squamish name to the BIM logo. I have not heard of any discussions around that.
Thank you, Councillor Fast.
Thank you. I appreciate the idea here, and I'd refer people to the sign, the Islands Trust sign that's down as people come off the ferry that does have the word on it, and there's a couple of other places too, and other municipal signage down there. My feeling would be, and I put it in my personal signature, but that's kind of an acknowledgement kind of thing. I think we've had a lot of work done on our logo in the past few years. And I figure that a more substantive reconciliation action would be for Bowen Island municipality to begin referring bylaws and official community plan amendments to the nation. Because as far as we know, as I know, we're the only local government in the Islands Trust area that does not refer land use bylaw amendments and official community plan amendments and those kinds of land related decisions to the local First Nation. So I think that would be more the direction I would prefer to go in terms of substance and reconciliation action. Not that I'm against it, it's just I'd prefer to do the referrals first when we've got limited time and staff.
Thank you, Councillor Fast, Councillor Jurgensen, and then Councillor Getty. And then I can also provide some recommendations from this end. Councillor Jurgensen, I see you have your hand up. Or is it still up from before?
Sorry, that was actually from before.
Plus tilde to
Okay.
I do support any action that can bring us closer to reconciliation, whether that be changing the name of the island to Nuckwalahum officially down the road. But as for the logo, I think either doing it that way or as Councillor Fast suggests, there would be value in either of those courses of action.
Thank you, Councillor Getty.
Without really getting into it, I support this suggestion. But I also think we have been referring, and it is a question of capacity from the Squamish Nation. But for instance, the OCP amendment for Cape Roger Curtis went to Squamish Nation. And I'm not sure
That was Metro Vancouver.
well,
Just to contain us on the issue around the logo.
I support both ideas, and perhaps we should refer the to another discussion.
Yeah, so I think just so I'm hearing the notes about the logo. I'm also hearing the notes about reconciliation in general. I know that there has been some staff work done on it as well that will be coming back to us, particularly as we look for an OCP review that fits in with that specifically names reconciliation as a core framework around the OCP review, as well as funding that's come from the province, both for emergency management as well as some planning pieces. And then there's still a meeting that I have pending with Cal Salem around bringing our municipality and the nation closer together. So my advice would be perhaps a referral to staff for future comment, and then bring it back within the context of our larger reconciliation actions.
Okay, well, a comment and then a resolution. All these actions, other actions that we're talking about, including having it on the sign as the ferry arrives, are a good step. This is a much bigger step because you don't have to have received a letter from the municipality or had an individual connection. It's anybody that goes to the website sees it. And to me, it's all about awareness. And we are absolutely committed to reconciliation. I think that is a big step in demonstrating it. So I'd like to move that we refer the suggestion of having Welcome added to our logo for discussion.
So motion to refer this to staff for discussion. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Morse, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
audio now.
Aye.
And that carries unanimously. All right, thank you, everyone. Moving on to section 6, business arising from minutes. We have 6.1, consideration of development variance permit, DVP 0300. This is a fairly straightforward application. And I'm presuming all councillors have read the report. I'm just looking for agreement as to whether we need a presentation on this or not. No. Okay, so we do have our planner here. If you want to join us at the front here, Drew. Just for the sake of time, we're going to skip the presentation and we'll move right into the discussion. So if councillors have specific questions about the presentation, they can ask you. So prior to moving the motion, we'll look for questions. Councillor Fast and then Councillor Morse.
I was going to move the motion. So was I.
Okay, go ahead. Councillor Fast, you had your hand up first.
I move and the motion that council issue development variance permit DVP 2023-0300 to reassign rear and side lot lines setbacks for 1673 Evergreen Lane legally described as strata lot 3, district lot 492, group 1, New Westminster District strata plan, BCS 3421, together with an interest in the common property proportion to the unit entitlement of the strata lot as shown on Form B, PID 027933792.
Moved by Counselor Fast, seconded by Counselor Getty. We're too slow, Counselor Lake. Any discussion on this item? Counselor Fast.
Just speaking briefly to my motion, this is one council has seen before. I think that it helps protect the little piece of public park viewpoint, public access to a beautiful viewpoint by shifting everything over a little bit, giving a little more room for the public viewpoint. I'm in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. And Mr. Backen, I believe you're back here for 7.1. I don't know if there's a presentation for this one, but the staff report was pretty in depth. And this does feel like a more important issue. So I'll give the floor to you if there's any comments you'd like to make on this.
Thank you. So I don't have a proper presentation, just do have a basic map I made just to show areas being affected. That I can put here. So thank you, Mayor and Council. So the purpose of this report is to introduce the changes to the land use bylaw required through Bill 44 as the province takes measures to increase housing availability and affordability in BC. This bill, referred to as the Housing Statutes Residential Development Amendment Act 2023, is intended to end single-family zoning in the province for communities of a certain size, will increase allowances for secondary suites, relaxes restrictions around off-street parking requirements, and removes one-off public hearing requirements for housing projects that are consistent with the OCP. A number of these changes through Bill 44 apply only to communities with a population over 5,000 people. Any smaller municipalities do have the option to opt in. The purpose of this report is to discuss at this time the changes to secondary suite permissions, and which are required to be addressed by a deadline of June 30th, 2024. The province has set this date as a deadline for local governments to update their bylaws to accommodate the changes put forward through Bill 44. Specifically, local governments must move to permit one or both of the following. Number one, that at least one additional housing unit within a detached dwelling that would otherwise be a single-family dwelling. And or two, that at least one additional housing unit within another building on the same parcel or parcels of land on which a detached single-family dwelling is located. So that second one's referring to a detached secondary suite, as we call them under Bowen's land use bylaw. So in other words, Bowen Island municipality must permit every single-family residential lot permission to construct a secondary suite or a detached secondary suite. Currently on Bowen, the majority of residential zones already have this permission. There is, however, a list of zones and subzones that don't allow secondary suites, which I've listed in the report. These are the zones that must be amended to allow secondary suites by June 30th, 2024, as per the province's requirement. And yeah, what I showed up here on the screen, very basic map of me just to show areas that are, any non-residential areas not part of these amendments. Green areas are residential areas that meet these requirements already, and red are ones needing amendment. And this is, again, a very, very basic map. Like some of these are, I don't know if you guys have looked in our comprehensive zones, but we have sub areas of zones. Some of those sub areas need amendments, some don't. So again, really probably an approximate map without drawing tiny details that no one can see. It's noted that the policies of our official community plan already support secondary suites in all areas across the island. Apart from the changes required through the province's bill, one additional possible change council may wish to consider is the size of secondary suites. Currently, Bowen's land use bylaw restricts the floor area to 90 square meters. That was passed to mirror the BC building code. However, that maximum under the building code has since been removed. So in order to offer more flexibility around secondary housing, council may wish to raise that floor area maximum or remove it completely. If that change is desirable, council can direct staff to add that to the amendments going forward through Bill 44. Regarding notifications, municipalities prohibited from sending this bylaw to a public hearing under Bill 44. Instead, prior to first reading, notice would be publicly posted in the undercurrent and online. As these changes are required by the province, staff recommend the council furthers this report to the Advisory Planning Commission and Housing Advisory Committee, and to direct staff to prepare a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw as required under Provincial Bill 44, subject to comments from the aforementioned committees.
Okay, thank you. I guess in that referral to committees, I presume that they would be looking at them to comment on, provide advice to council on things like the 90 square meters and some of these other pieces where they can discuss that in detail.
I think regarding the 90 square meters, I think we would want a special order from council to bring that up. Everything else would be the changes, mainly would be bringing up the changes required under the bylaw, but.
Right. I suppose, so the question I'm asking in the opening that I'm giving you is that when this goes to the Advisory Planning Commission and the Housing Advisory Committee, please ask them for feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Morris.
That was largely going to be my question. Do we need to add that to the resolution? Because it's in it, all it says in the resolution is in accordance with the changes required through Provincial Bill 44. And maybe and ask the APC to look at the maximum size.
I'm not sure if we necessarily need to do that through the language of the recommendation. We do have council representatives on each of those committees, and I suppose I'm just presencing it here because I would like to see those comments from
I
those
would too,
committees.
but I didn't want to raise it with the committee if everybody else on council didn't think it was a good idea. So that's why I was thinking we should add it to the resolution.
Over to you for comments, Councilor Getty.
Oh, and I had one more.
Oh, yes, Councilor Morris.
I was really glad to see the map. It wasn't in our package. Because I saw this great long list. And I thought you're planning on adding secondary suites in every one of those things in the list, but it's only on the red areas.
Right, yeah, sorry, I guess in my list, there's, been 4 or 5 there that are just non-residential. Industrial, green zones, water zones, yeah.
And one of the other things I discovered at the housing conference, in chatting with, over lunch with Don Lidstone, and a few of us were chatting with him. There's a lot of places on the island where there are covenants. You can say there will only be one single family dwelling. And this Bill 44 does not override the covenants.
Oh, it does not.
No, but as Planner Martin has said in the past, somebody could apply for a building permit and it meets our legislation. But then you're going to have people saying, but there's no, the covenant doesn't. So we may find ourselves in some issues where people can get a building, but strata or covenants like there's one in our biggest point road. That's no secondary suites.
Councilor Getty.
I understood that the conditions precedent, what you had to have in line, and first of all, was that the population was over 5,000, that the properties in question had to be on a municipal sewer system, and that they would be within an urban containment boundary, which is linked and has been defined in a regional growth strategy, but is not clear whether or not it applies to any of these parts on Bowen and whether we're urban or rural in that forever question that comes up. So, and there's that other letter that came from the minister, not the person that staff have been contacting, that says that because of the preserve and protect mandate of the Islands Trust, that the islands are exempt from a lot of the legislation. So yes, we are a municipality. It seems to me it's a very foggy, loose, never been tested before kind of combination of factors. So wondering if we need to make these changes within June, before June the 30th, if in fact we don't fit within the parameters of the legislation. Because if we're talking about 3 units in 280 square meters, that's half the size of my lot in Deep Bay. So, you know, it might fit with Snug Cove, but it's pretty serious for these chunks of Bowen Island, especially if we're exempt.
Right, Councilor Getty, so So we, in terms of what we have to change in our or June 30th, it's specifically this allowance for an extra the secondary suite or the detached secondary suite. In terms of the other changes happening through Bill 44, what they refer to as the small scale multi-unit housing changes in terms of allowing the third unit on, as you said, properties under I think 280 square meters, fourth unit on one's larger. We are exempt from those. We're not having to make those changes.
Just to add to what the planner said, just that Bill 44 has different provisions, so they require that essentially every residential area have a secondary suite or a detached secondary suite. And then separately, they have the requirements for what they call the small scale multi-unit housing. And that's the piece that Bill 1 is exempt from due to our population size and outside of urban containment boundary. So there are different provisions in the act. So one says you have to have a secondary suite, and then the next provision down says you need multiple units on a lot. And then regarding the piece in the Islands Trust, so the Bill 44 exempts lands in a local trust area under the Islands Trust Act. So Bowen Island Municipality as a municipality within the trust is not exempt.
We're not a local trust area.
I get that. It seems to me that if it's a gray area, that it needs to be clarified from our side in terms of why we think we should be exempt. And, you know, why this is potentially creating problems in terms of densification in, I mean, are there any provisions? I suppose that's a question for the APC in terms of whether or not there's any considerations for water and septic that attach to this. I know we did that for some of the secondary suites. They have to prove capacity.
I'll just answer also. We did have multiple meetings through December and January with both the ministry and the Islands Trust regarding specifically Bill 44 and which provisions do not apply to Bowen. And so the consensus from everyone's opinion is that the secondary suite provision applies to Bowen as a municipality. It applies to all local governments that aren't in a local trust area. And then I know that regardless from that any bylaw would still have to comply to the Islands Trust policy statement. And so that's where maybe, challenges may arise with that. And then I think specific to water and septic, we would rely at least largely on our existing provisions in our building bylaw that we can prohibit or we will not issue building permits where there's no water issues. So like in blue water, we can only permit secondary suites, but due to the water issue, we are not issuing permits for secondary suites in that area.
I saw some other hands up, Councillor Fast and then Councillor Morse.
Just that I was also looking through all of this with the letter that I saw that the Minister of Housing had sent to Salt Spring Local Trust Committee. And so that opened up some windows of questions. And thank you, Daniel, for your response on a Sunday evening or afternoon or whatever it was. And just a quick response, but I went to the amendment bill. So it's all changing and being updated, and regulations are still to come, for example, respecting what constitutes an urban containment boundary. So there may still be changes coming. And but my questions were satisfied. Thank you.
All right. And just for clarity, we are outside of the urban containment boundary for Metro Vancouver. Okay. Councillor Morse?
I'm fully supportive of this proposal. I think it will help with that. Some more probably affordable housing or housing that's needed. And some of the lots outside the cove are provide their own septic and their wells would be adequate. So I would move that council directs staff to prepare a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw in accordance with the changes required through Provincial Bill 44. And that the APC and the Housing Advisory Committee be asked for comments as well as comments on, what was the thing we were adding? Totally gone out of my head now.
Perhaps the wording could be comments on the considerations raised in the report presented to council at February.
Oh, and comments on the size of the secondary dwelling. From subject comments from the APC Planning Committee and the Housing Advisory Committee, including comments on the size of the accessory or the secondary suite.
Just going to give the corporate officer a moment to clean that up, and if you can read back what you've got.
I don't want to step on term, but would a separate motion be better?
Oh.
That council requests the APC and the Housing Advisory Committee to comment on the maximum secondary suite
That's fine with
size,
me too.
just to keep it clean.
Because I didn't think I
Hang on a second, I'm just going to orient myself to where we are.
So I moved the original motion.
just moved the second half of it.
No, I did start off and then I was trying to change it. So I did move the council direct staff to prepare a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw in accordance with the changes required through Provincial Bill 44, subject to comments from the Advisory Planning Committee and the Housing Advisory Committee, as well as.
Okay, so let's separate.
Both suggested a separate motion, which is fine with me.
Right.
So let's separate
But
there.
we did miss the first part of that motion, which is that council refers this report to the Advisory Plan Commission, Housing Advisory Committee, and the
right.
council. So just
Sorry.
that first part was missed. So do you want to move that?
I moved that.
Okay, so the first two recommendations will move as is.
Seeing that first bit is a-
And just for clarity, I'll read that out. That says that council refers this report to the Advisory Planning Committee Commission and the Housing Advisory Committee, and that council direct staff to prepare a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw in accordance with the changes required through the Provincial Bill 44, subject to comments from the Advisory Planning Commission and the Housing Advisory Committee. For second for that, seconded moved by Councillor Morris, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye, and that carries unanimously.
Abstain.
Abstentions are not possible. So if there's not a vote, it's considered a vote in the affirmative.
I'm not voting on. I'll vote against it.
Okay, so Councillor Getty in opposition. The second half of the motion, as the corporate officer has it, is, no, feel free to read it out.
The council requests the Advisory Planning Commission and Housing Advisory Committee to comment on the maximum secondary suite size.
Is that acceptable, Councillor Morse?
Yeah.
Okay, moved by Councillor Morse. Seconded by Councillor Wake. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. Councillor Getty in opposition. Okay, thank you. Moving on to 7.2, introduction to a rezoning application RZ 2023-0255. We have Planner back in here for round 3. This is also a fairly straightforward property. This is the ambulance station Westland Insurance building. Does council feel that they need a presentation on this, or you have questions or would like to move forward? I'm just looking at the clock here. Okay, so perhaps we'll forego the presentation because I think the report was pretty
Could you
self-explanatory.
put the map up?
Sure. Zoning map or?
Yeah.
Okay, and Councillor Getty for a question.
All right, so this is to change the zoning to allow for general services, to allow the insurance company, which is no longer a home-based business, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so why is it not allowed as commercial, which is already included in that?
The office use that they're trying to do, it fell under general services. That was the use under the best definition land use bylaw.
Right, it appeared that it was a new category. there was a list of categories that were allowed, right? And there was ambulance service and commercial or retail. And then there was this one that was adding something called general services, which is not defined. And why would the insurance company not be covered under commercial, which is an allowable use?
I'm not actually seeing I have the level of uses up here. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing commercial there. In reviewing the definitions, both for preparing this as well as the temporary use permit, that's why they were argued that they didn't fall under any of the existing ones, and general services was the one that would have fallen under.
Is there a definition somewhere of general services?
So I can't. I'm sorry, let me check.
Pretty wide and vague is my problem.
Planner Martin?
So the zone allows retail use as an accessory use, so retail being like the selling of items. And this instead is a general service use, which is defined in our land use bylaw.
Is there a definition of general services?
Yes, general services means the use that provides services to individuals or other businesses, including and not limited to bank and financial institution, post office, instructional service, phone processing, photocopying service, rentals, barber shop, or beauty salon. Activities of an accounting, administrative, clerical, consulting, professional, or other record keeping nature conducted for monetary gain or for benefit of the public. And then one about repair or cleaning services.
It's just not selling stuff.
I have a problem with this in terms of the presentation and the report in terms of, I have trouble hearing that, and it's not written anywhere so that we can actually look at it ahead of time. But,
Can we put the map back up?
Sure.
So the little VC one in the pink. Is that VCI or VC one?
That's BC1, it's a separate zone.
Okay, that was, the eyes and ones look the same.
Sure, I think that's, yeah.
I guess my concern is, the bottom corner is the RCMP station.
That's correct.
So do we want to pre-zone that for general services? Considering that they might sell it at some point?
So
Can we stick to the agenda?
That's what I'm sticking to.
It's a valid question.
it's worth saying, if council wanted to make the change to this property alone and not to affect any other, we could set up a zone.
Variation.
Zone variation, yeah.
That was my question is, right now, the way the motion's worded, we're going to make the fire hall general services, the police station general services, and the ambulance building general services.
And there would also be the museum and then the library.
Okay, and that was the other question. There's two others. So I would be a little bit concerned about that pre-zoning without maybe having thought about that for the police station especially, because at some point that built land, the feds will be selling that. So I would prefer the zone variation.
Okay.
So are we referring this to the APC or?
Yeah, so the recommendation in the agenda is that council refers the application to the Advisory Planning Commission, and that council directs staff to prepare a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw to allow for the development proposal presented by Jersey Investments Incorporated outlined in the February 26th, 2024 meeting.
So I don't think we need to amend the resolution. As long as we understand that staff will raise the issue to the APC.
You know, alternatively, council could move the first part of the resolution, which is simply the referral to the Advisory Planning Commission, and then wait for that feedback to come back before directing staff to do anything, or both of them can be moved.
Well, I guess part of the problem is we need the comments back before it's staff. Because there's two very different ways you're going to word the bylaw. So I will move the council refer application RZ 230-255 to the Advisory Planning Commission.
Seconded by Councillor Getty. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand. Sorry, Councillor Jurgensen, you had your hand up. I didn't see you on the screen here with the presentation up.
Audio now unmuted.
I
Drew Becken, votes.
simply had the same point that Councillor Moore did about being a bit concerned about pre-zoning the RCMP building. That's been addressed.
Thank you. I did call the question. Did everybody vote already? Can't remember. Okay, so let's call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Unmute audio. Audio now unmuted.
And that carries unanimously, and
Audio.
I trust that staff will also bring some of the substance of this discussion to the Advisory Planning Commission. Thank you. And moving on to 8.1, Library Budget 2024. We are joined by our Chief Librarian, Tina Nielsen.
Afternoon, Mayor and Council. Would you like our PowerPoint presentation?
Audio now unmuted.
It won't be long, but I know time is. Happy to do a PowerPoint presentation if you like, or we can simply talk.
I think it's coming up.
Okay. I'll start just by saying thank you very much for having us here today. And I wanted to introduce Angela Reedish, who is our Finance Committee Chair on the Library Board. And I see in our audience, we have Deanna Brummett, who's a new Library Board member, as well as Peter Matthews, who is also on our Board Finance Committee. So thank you everyone for being here. Yeah, you can start with the green one. Oh, the slide before. Oh, sorry. Just the intro. So I just wanted to introduce Angie so she could speak a little bit further.
Thank you. And I do understand the time pressure, so we will move to sort of facts and figures fairly promptly. I just wanted to also thank.
No, I was trying to alleviate the time pressure so that you folks could come and a spacious amount of time. So but don't feel rushed. I mean, we're always happy to have the library here. So, don't feel rushed on our account. We're here for you. So take as much time as you need.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as you know, as like last year, the Library Act requires the library and the library board to bring an approved budget to the council. And so we're here to give you a bit more detail on that budget and also, to move the recommendation or to request that the council receive the budget for information and consideration in their financial plan. So maybe we could have the next slide. And I think that it's the same as it is in your papers, which may make it slightly easier to read. And I want to, there's a lot of numbers on here. I'm going to speak to some specifics and then you can ask questions, obviously, about anything. So with respect to the specifics, look at the last column on the right-hand side. And that's the variance between what we're requesting planning for this year as opposed to last year. And what you'll see is that we're requesting an increase in the transfer from the municipality of about $70,000. And that, if you look down to see the changes in expenses, you'll see that the staffing expenses are increased by $57,000. So almost all of the increase in the transfer from the municipality is to fund increases in staffing costs. Those increases in staffing costs come primarily from a review of compensation that was done at the library as it was done at the municipality. So every 4 years, there's a compensation review. That review came in early of 2023. The Finance Committee, the Personnel Committee considered the recommendations, recommended that as of July, we implement the recommendations. And that's a big chunk of the $57,000 increase in staffing costs. So I want to be clear that there are no increased numbers of staff or out. So this is funding to maintain the same level of service as we have had in the past, not to increase the level of service. It's sort of an inflationary cost, if you like. Similarly, the other items, the difference between the $70,000 increase and the $57,000 is inflationary costs in collections and all the other activities of the library. So that's kind of our business as usual piece of the budget. The good news piece of the budget is that the library got last year a 3-year, what they call an enhancement grant. And maybe we'll go back to the previous slide if we may. I think it's easier for me to talk over the numbers, but again, happy to have questions. So the library got a grant of $154,000 to spend over 3 years with a mandate to enhance the services that the library provides to the community. And Tina's going to speak in some detail about where the board and the librarian thought that we should allocate those funds. That's what, if you look in the variance between what actually happened, which is the middle column, and almost at the bottom, you'll see that there's a transfer to library surplus of $150,000. So basically that means that we received the $150,000 grant and we put it into reserves while we figured out what we want to do with it. This year, in the 2024 budget, you'll see that we're bringing it out of library reserves and we're going to spend it. And there's 2 line items in expenses. One is enhancement grant operational, one is enhancement grant capital, and that's sort of the $138,000 of the enhancement grant to be spent during 2024. So I'm, with that, going to turn it over to Tina. Sure. And maybe we'll skip the middle slide.
Yes, skip that slide. We talked about that slide. Thank you. So I just wanted to talk about the enhancement grant, which came from the province through the Public Libraries branch. And midway through 2023, all libraries in the province received an enhancement grant. It's a one-time grant to be spent over 3 years, 2024, 23, 24, and 2025. Every library got a differing amount, mostly based on your population and some other criteria. So we received $154,477. And as Angie mentioned, it is meant to be used to enrich people's library experiences through augmented or enhanced local services at your library through services, programs, and collections. You can use it to respond to local service priorities or to make services more accessible and inclusive. It's fairly wide open in the sense of the parameters assigned to it were not super strict. And the deadline to expend it is by the end of 2025. So because we received it in the middle of 2023, we didn't spend anything in 2023, but we spent the latter half trying to sort out how we were going to spend this money.
You really didn't spend anything in 2023?
We didn't spend any of the enhancement grant in 20.
About 154, and you only put 150 in.
The rest is for 2025. We need to, we're not going to spend everything this year. There will be some money that we will spend in 2025 as well from that grant. So as Angie mentioned, it's shown in transfer from library surplus. That's where it shows in revenue for this year, and the expenditures are shown in 2 separate line items, one for operations and one for capital. Slide. So we essentially the board decided to divide the money into pots or pillars. So there's sort of 4 pillars of library service: collections, programs, facility, and people. And so I'm just going to go over the first couple. So in collections, we have allotted a chunk of money to spend on increasing and improving our physical and electronic collections. Our focus is on early literacy materials, some more literary review materials, language learning, and some arts and crafts. These are areas that we have had patrons ask us about and inquire about. So, for example, Mango Languages is an online database to learn a variety of languages. We're looking at adding that in. We've added a database called Creative Bug, which is an arts and crafts video learning database. So most of them are focused on lifelong learning. So we're looking at adding things to allow people to continue their lifelong learning journeys. Programming, we're looking to increase some of our programming, and that may involve hiring facilitators or paying people to be facilitators, or it may be staff having a few more hours made available to them to run programming. And again, that sort of lifelong learning theme on it. We're looking at some children's programming to try to look at science, technology, engineering, arts and math programming, literacy programming, looking for teens and tweens to have some more safe and social sort of spaces for studying and gathering and getting together for various groups. And so adults also looking at doing some Indigenous author talk series and adult sort of lifelong learning series where people come to sort of philosopher cafe type events. So we're proposing that we add both hard and soft, so physical materials and electronic materials, and expanding our databases. And so then we've got a couple of things we want to do in the facility, and these are all still in the phase of we don't know if we have enough money for them. But one of them that we're doing next Monday is the installation of a soundproof booth. So it'll be something available to the public, but also be used for library staff. There's a picture of what it would look like there. And it's a place where you can book it and come and sit there either by yourself or with one other person. If you need to have a meeting, you're doing a Zoom meeting, you need a truly quiet space and you'd like some privacy, that's what this soundproof booth will do. And we'll also use it for our own tech tutoring purposes and other staff use, but mostly for the public. And we're looking at possibly completing an outdoor storage and covered sort of picnic space that we had originally planned to do in the Snug Cove Cultural Corner landscaping project, which completed last year. And we didn't have enough money to do it. It was a building in the back of the library that would be a couple of storage areas and then a large extended roof where you could sit and have picnic tables underneath. So we're looking into whether that's something that we can do within this somewhat limited budget, and we'll see whether that's a possibility. If it is a possibility, we'll come back to you asking permission to do that in that space. We're also looking at refreshing our signage and some of the landscaping outside, renovating our staff area to try to make that staff area more efficient and effective and support our staff by giving them a place where they can have some privacy for their breaks, etc. And a water bottle filling station, even though Doc Morgan's has one across the street, we'll add one as well, so that will be inside the building. And then, of course, support for the people who make the library happen. So staff training, we've got a number of things planned to try to bring up our current staff in terms of sort of succession planning, giving them some more training that they may not have because they're not librarians. They haven't come through a library training program. So there's some options out there to train our staff up so that they might be able to move up in the library as we work through succession planning. And then some funding to hire consultants who need to support us, whether that's in doing the drawings for projects or facilitating programs. So that's really, in a nutshell, what we're looking for. There's certainly a contingency and some ability to move money around from one pot to another with board approval if things turn out to be too expensive one way or cheaper another way. That's sort of the plan, to spend that $154,000 over the next 2 years.
And I should have noted as I presented the numbers that we have worked with Kristen Watson, the CFO, on the payroll numbers in particular, because the payroll is done through the municipality. So all the benefits and figuring out costs and so on, that's all been done with Kristen, and also we submitted the budget to her for inclusion in the 5-year financial plan as a possibility. I guess I just summarize by saying that we're hoping to get funding to maintain the services that our patrons value, and I think are essential for maintaining and building a thriving community. And I must say that I was struck as I read the mission statement that you have at the top of your agenda about improving social well-being for present and future generations, encouraging and fostering community involvement, enhancing the small, friendly, caring character of the community. I think the library is core to what the municipality is trying to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you. I look to council for any comments or questions. Councillor Morse.
Sorry, I'm a numbers person. So You said you got 150,477. Yet you only put 150,767 in surplus. So to me, that means you've already spent $3,710 of the enhancement grant or whatever it's called. And therefore you've only got 150,767 to spend going forward.
So at the end of 2023, we were in a deficit of that amount of money. And it was mostly related to us implementing the compensation review in July. So we funded that when we increased our staff wages in July of 2023. We were funding that primarily from an unutilized staff position that was empty for a while, but we were still short a little bit. So that normally would have just come from our surplus, which we have about a $25,000 surplus
Reserves.
pot reserve. And we had expected to use our reserve of surplus to fund any discrepancy in that payroll amount. What our lovely CFO, Kristen Watson, does is she doesn't take all of the grant out and then put a little bit of surplus in, because she's moving all of our grant into surplus. She just didn't move it all. So we already had some surplus. So we will still spend 154,477 of the province's money
Going to go down.
on those projects. It's just that, however much you just said, 3,700 is going to come from our previous surplus to make up the difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a little,
Sorry.
not my way of numbers. So the other is, some of the things you're doing are programs and things that maybe some community outreach, that are things that are going to be probably fitting into ongoing operations with this enhancement money. So the you've got 157 that you're going to spend, and maybe you're going to spend 20 or 30,000 on programs. People are going to want to see that same programming going forward every year. So that means future budgets, you're going to be asking for 30,000 more of operating money.
When we went through the process of deciding how to spend this funding, we talked a lot about what can we do that is permanent with this one-time money. We spend it once and it stays. So the facility things, the concrete things, the buying of collections. But there are soft costs that are things that would have to be repeated every year. So we were cautious to not put too much of them into that category because the funding ends at the end of 2025. Our hope, of course, depending upon many things like the provincial election at the end of this year, is that the provincial government, who has been lobbied for the last 4 years by the BC Library Partners Group to increase provincial funding. Our hope is that we've now had 2 one-time grants from the province, this one very significant. Our hope is that in going forward, that the province will recognize that what we've been asking for is continued ongoing increase in provincial funding, which has been stagnant since 2009. So that's our hope. If it doesn't come through and we have to reduce our programming because there isn't it's not able to be funded through the budget, then I think we're quite prepared that these may be programs that we happily add extra programs for the next 2 years, but we may not be able to continue that on.
And then my other question is big increase in operational. Last year you didn't spend your budget, and this year you've got $28,000 more than what was actually spent in 2023. What's the operational increase?
We didn't spend our budget because we didn't spend the enhancement grant, the 150,000.
No,
Oh, sorry.
I think it's this line here, that one.
The operational.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the operational within our budget for the library board, if there is an overage in, for example, payroll, and there's less spending in operations, sometimes that's done as deliberately as possible, so to try to reduce, but knowing that we were increasing our payroll in July based on the recommendations of the compensation review, we certainly did whatever we could to try and reduce expenditures to make up for that difference that we would be adding in payroll.
So then the follow-up question is, what's the 16,000 increase in operational covering?
So there is we're leasing a new photocopier. We are attempting to increase our cleaning. We have cleaning 5 days a week. We are going to 7 days a week because we're open, or the building is open 7 days a week. And then otherwise, there's inflationary increases on a variety of the everyday operating costs. Yeah.
Thank you. You should be in state funds. You'd get money from all the time.
We're doing really well in the printing, and a lot of people are bringing their printing to us and paying for that.
Councillor Fast and followed by Councillor Getty.
Sure, thank you. As the council liaison member of the library board, I'm happy to make the recommendation. And I've been to all these meetings, and I don't have all the details because I don't always get to every one of the meetings, but I'm really happy with the board. It's doing a fabulous job.
I'm just going to clear the speakers list first.
Okay.
And then we'll do the recommendation. Councillor Getty.
So it's an increase in the transfer of $70,000, and that's significant, particularly in this budget and all the other capital projects. So, and when I look at your expense thing, there's 57,000 increase in the staffing, and that's explained in terms of cost of living and one staff person's retirement.
It was primarily the compensation review.
There is mention of somebody retiring.
Yes.
And so then the operational, with that's the next line is the enhancement grant operation. So other than the wish list, I mean, if there was any room to maneuver at all, it would seem to me that the 25,000 from the grant and the 82,000, which are the 16,000 increase, is there the wish list in terms of the facility changes? Is there wiggle room in there at all in terms of trying to leave it for maybe the next fiscal year? If we get the community center finished?
In the 16,000 that
Or
you're saying for operations?
Yeah, I would assume that the staffing costs are pretty well fixed. The grant money, in terms of an expense, that's offset in terms of the grant.
Right.
Okay. So then the new money, which would be funded by the BIM allocation, part of that is going to be the increase in operational. And that's really the only place where there's room, right? So the collections, it's a 1,500, and the capital is less than last year, and it's also balanced out with a fairly sizable chunk from the enhancement grant. So seems to me that the only place for any kind of changes would be operational, and that would be we've indicated before, that's the photocopier and the cleaning and
Yeah, and inflationary on hydro and
so what is
supplies, and
where does the facility changes, the outdoor cover?
they would be in the enhancement grant capital.
So in terms of, basically what you're saying is that in terms of your increase of 70,000, that there's very little or no wiggle room that you're presenting.
I think the way I would put it is that we're not asking to increase the services. We're not, in the past, I know in the last 2 or 3 years, people have, there's been a request for an additional half FTE, for example, and we're not asking for that. We're asking partly because the enhancement grant will enable us to do things to improve services. But so this is a budget, yes, that is just like last year, except for these inflationary costs.
I think our library budget is often quite tight. There's not often a lot of wiggle room. Like every other department, staffing is the biggest cost, and to reduce that would be a reduction in service at some level. And then operationally, it's possible we could tweak down in that 16,000.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the library. I appreciate it. My kids appreciate it. Whole family appreciates it. My only questions are around one of the things that this council talks very frequently about and is very attuned to is capital renewal and replacement and asset management. And I'm just curious, I think I'm not super plugged into what the library needs, but I know that there are things like roof beams in the future that will need to be replaced. And I don't know what else comes with an older building like that. And I'm curious whether that's on the immediate horizon, whether that's a concern and where the funding from that will eventually come from.
Yeah, so I think we, it's certainly, I don't know, I am unaware of an assessment being done, those beams in the front that have rot in them. Whether they're structural, I don't know. It is something that Public Works is aware of and BIM staff is aware of. We don't have a plan as to who's responsible. Well, we have an operating agreement between the library and BIM that says BIM is responsible for the infrastructure of the building. And the library is responsible for the operational window cleaning and broken windows and, interior cleaning, et cetera. So that agreement essentially says it falls to BIM. But I don't think there is any fund that has been allocated at any particular time, a particular fund for that building that I'm aware of. I think it perhaps falls into the general capital renewal and replacement, but I'm not the person I can't speak to that. I know, for example, there's a project happening in the budget to replace a pipe that runs underneath the library. And I believe that came from Public Works and is in the 5-year financial plan as part of their budget request. But in terms of the rest of the infrastructure in the building, I don't think there's an allocated fund.
Okay. I guess I was asking because given that there are capital expenditures in this budget to go out and build new things that are presumably going to need to have maintenance costs associated for them year over year. And will have their own renewal and replacement considerations that will come into the library budget, whether, something like an enhancement grant capital could actually be put in the building to defray costs that are eventually going to come back to either the library or the municipality in the near future.
I think we've certainly talked about the suggested project of the new building outside, which may or may not be feasible for us. And we don't have a cost estimate yet. I've certainly had a conversation with Mr. Edwards about the long-term maintenance. And we do have some possibility of providing some funding for that through an endowment that we're receiving for our MedShed program. But that's still in the works. And also that project, of the money that we think we've allotted, I'm suspecting it's going to be much more than what we thought it was going to be. And that project may simply be removed from our plan and allotted to something else. In terms of allotting building maintenance from the enhancement grant, I think that would be a tough sell to the province. They've been fairly specific to say that the enhancement grant is to make up for the fact that they have not given us an increase since 2009, and that it's specifically geared towards programs and services that improve library service for the patrons. We might have a bit of a hard stretch to say keeping the building standing is an improvement to service as opposed to adding, maintaining the building, particularly when we have an operating agreement that specifies that it's a municipal responsibility to maintain the infrastructure of the building. So that would be a tough sell, I think.
Okay. I just thought I'd ask, knowing that all of the funds come back to tax dollars.
Exactly.
Ultimately, right? So just being cautious and cognizant, particularly when Councillor Morris raises the question of, are we creating new programs and services that are then going to carry an annual operating cost,
right,
that then if they get cut, the letters come to this body here about why are you cutting funding to the library, and knowing that just with the state of capital infrastructure on the island generally. If there are going to be large projects, then I think we just need to be very mindful about the very limited pot of taxpayer money that goes to those, and at least having a plan to get those addressed.
Yeah.
Because if it's we're going to invest in new without dealing with existing, whether it's the library's responsibility or public works responsibility. I think in this climate of what I'm hearing out in the community, it's becoming a bit of a tougher thing to manage.
And certainly if that project moves ahead at all, it will come back to you and we can certainly continue that conversation about whether it's something that can be managed in that longer term picture.
Okay. Okay, thank you. CRCAO with his hand up here.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Tina, and to the others presenting. Really appreciate the presentation and all the effort that you put in to serve the community through the library. We're pretty lucky to have the library that we have, and I think it's largely due to yourselves and the board, and so thank you for that. I had a question that's similar to what the mayor was speaking about, and it's related to the previous Cultural Corner grant project. And Tina, we communicated about this briefly by email just I think last week. And are there some deficiencies from that project? Like if it seems that you can't use the enhancement grant for the other shelter in the back, are there deficiencies from that first project that are still remaining that the library or the municipality might end up being on the hook for that could be offset with this grant?
Yeah, I think I know what you're referring to, and certainly there is one area that is not properly finished. I met with our architect this morning, and she provided an option for a plan that I think is quite doable, which I'm happy to chat with you about. And the funding for that would come from our side one way or another. We have our library foundation, we have Friends of the Library, and we also have our regular budget. But I think there is an opportunity to complete and fix that problem along the Cardina sidewalk in a permanent way for a reasonable amount of money, which I think we can provide.
Okay, so thank you for that.
And with that, Councillor Fast, I'll look to you for to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd be happy to make the motion that council receive for information and consideration in the BIM draft 2024 financial plan, the 2024 Bowen Island Public Library operating and capital budgets.
Moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Morse. Any discussion? None, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Audio not unmuted.
That carries unanimously. And thank you so much for both of you being here, as well as to the other board members who joined us online. Your presence is appreciated.
Thank you.
And moving on to 8.2 Health Center Septic Covenant, we have our manager of planning here. Aren't any comments on your report before I look for let's see, shaking head, no comments. So what I'd like to do is get the recommendation on the floor, as it'll either be approved, rejected, or referred. Councillor Getty.
I move that council directs staff to enter into the restricted covenant at 1029 Miller Road, legally described as Lot A in District Block 490, Group 1, New Westminster District Plan, PCP 2020428, Accept Plan EPP 98055, PID 026484480, to permit the Bowen Island Health Center to use a portion of the lot as a septic field.
Moved by Councillor Getty. Councillor Wake, you're just too slow today. Seconded by Councillor Fast. Any discussion on this motion? Councillor Getty to speak to it, followed by Councillor Morse.
Just in the specifics of the term, I've got some suggestions for amendments, and I'm not sure that they have to happen before this. It could be an addendum. But with respect to the letter number C and what it refers to and the term of the agreement, I think that you should use the word years in there. specifically. And when you're adding the formula A plus B, I think you should be using actual costs and not estimates when you're making those distinctions. And with respect to, there's a number star sign in there. And I think you're saying either one or the other, and maybe you should spell it out and be more specific. And finally, there's no mention at any point in terms of there being any kind of screening. So because it's a public building and there's going to be any number of possibility of things that don't work in a septic field, like swamps and sharps and stuff like that, there should be some specific requirement for there being a filter or a screen ahead of the project. It's not considered as part of the monitoring. And I think that is certainly from my office experience, that those were the things that constantly screwed up our plumbing. So if you've got a screen ahead of it, that's hugely helpful. Other than that.
Councillor Morris, then Councillor Fast.
I can't find one way. I just found the use of the word island health in the covenant really confusing, because there already is the Island Health Authority. And the first thing I thought was, what the heck is the Island Health Authority doing? So to me, it would make more sense if you called it the health center. And somewhere in here, you've limited it to medical uses or something rather than health center uses, which I thought would be, can't find that now. That.
An interjection from our CAO. Liam, do you have something you'd like to offer?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I was just responding to Councillor Getty's comments under section 1.5, where the calculation is the asterisk between the C and the D represents a multiplication. And so we could change that to an X. And well, we can, we did, the planner and I did talk about, getting the installation costs as they've occurred, because we will know that cost, but the decommissioning cost is something that we can't anticipate what that will be until it actually occurs.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Over to you, Councillor Fast.
I have a couple of basic questions. I couldn't see on the map exactly where this was. I'm wondering if you could put up, I didn't understand the drawing. I just want to know where we're talking about.
Sure, I'm not actually connected to the Zoom, but on that covenant area map, it's the area that backs against Crippen Park. So it sort of runs down from the land that's dedicated for birch south.
So it's that big triangle down the back?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the part that's called remainder. Is that the part? Remainder.
Not remainder DL 490, sorry, but south of that is outlined with a dashed line.
Oh, okay, that.
It's on part of remainder A. I mean, essentially where it is on the land is down the hill behind the health center. So not on the high rocky bluff, because it's not substantial septic, obviously, but down at the bottom.
Okay, so it's a long sort of skinny.
Yeah.
Thing. Okay, great, thank you. And then my other basic question is, what does decommission actually mean? Does it mean you dig it all up, or does it mean it's somebody puts the lid on it? It's something in between.
It's something in between. I think large parts of it are dug out and some parts can remain.
Okay. Thank you. Is this a timing thing that this needs to be done in a hurry?
It is. The health center is aiming for a March occupancy date. And so we were working to try to accommodate that and ensure that this is not a holdup in their occupancy.
Well, I like the idea of having a legal agreement in place anyway, so I think this is great. Thank you. I support the motion that has been made.
No further comments. I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries.
Aye, in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen, and that carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Moving on to new business, 11.1, update to Council on Metro Vancouver business. Very little to update on. The board meeting did happen last Friday. It was very short. It was about 45 minutes long for all 4 of the various board and district meetings. The only piece of interest that I would draw folks' attention to in their agenda package was the 3 UBCM recommendations related to climate that were approved and forwarded to the LMLGA. There have not been any committee meetings since. Questions? I'll talk about TransLink. TransLink has not had a mayor's council meeting, so there's nothing to update there apart from just noticing that there was no major announcements for investment in transit by the BC government in the 2024 budget, which might create some financial challenges for TransLink. So we will see how that plays out. And with that, I will look to our Islands trustees for an update.
Sure. Would you like me
Do
to?
you want to rock, paper, scissors for who goes first?
Okay.
No?
I'll go.
Councillor Fast, or
Okay.
Trustee Fast.
Thank you, Trustee Fast. I look to try to ask the questions about where is the increase coming from in from the Islands Trust budget. And I'd just like to start off by saying we've got that information, but the number has already been decreased from whatever it was last time, 16.9 or something, to 11.9 currently, including new non-market, new construction, basically. And so that it's been coming down, and this is from the executive committee agenda posted online. So it still could change again, either at executive committee, because they're setting the agenda for Trust Council, which is March the 12th to 14th. So the reasons for the budget and increase, and I just want to start off by saying it's it seems like a big number, 11.9, but it's a small amount. It's 11.9% increase in what is under 5% of their budget. So it doesn't always get addressed early on in the process. So that's why you see it coming down towards the end of the process. It's one of those kind of known unknowns. And it's less than what Bowen Island what BIM pays towards TransLink. So perspective is needed when we're talking about 11.9% increase. Last year's increase was small, but it had added $7 to our household's tax bill. So just some perspective there. The trust budget is up in relation to the parts that Bowen contributes to, because we don't contribute to all of it. We just contribute to Trust Council federation-wide things and Islands Trust Conservancy, which is the lands protected. So there's a long list here, and I can go through it if people would like, but Julie Mobbs is their head of administration, passed this along to Judy and I. And would you like me to read it to people, or should I send it by email?
Perhaps send it by email.
Okay, and happy to do that. And then what's not included in it is, of course, like any budget, it only includes expenses, staff mostly, and it doesn't include if we took a balance sheet approach, it would include all the nature reserves and conservation covenants, all the donations that come in to pay for those. None of those things are included in the budget that comes before us. So if you think about it with the balance sheet kind of approach, and then yeah, that's the kind of stuff I wanted to say, unless anybody's got questions. I also just wanted, yeah, go ahead.
How much is the actual amount?
The actual amount, Oh,
You said it had gone down, but
11.9% increase. And let's see if I've got that picture here. The Bowen Island municipal tax and requisition is calculated at approximately $387,000 in the draft budget. It's a total increase of 11.9. There will be some of that will come from new construction. They're estimating 1.1% of it will come from new tax base, things that are being built now. So that's about the budget. I wanted to mention also that UBCM Islands Trust is putting in a UBCM resolution, and it relates to calling on the province Ministry of Health to review the manual of composting toilet and grey water practice, to update the rules, the application criteria, because there have been new sort of standards set, but the practice manuals haven't been updated since like 2016 or something. And this is a way to address affordable housing costs, because those kinds of different kinds of infrastructure can reduce the costs of new affordable housing or new housing of any kind. And I've seen that too from those of you who may remember planner Dave Whitty recommended that. And then I wanted to say Trust Programs Committee, we've got a wildfire prevention webinar coming up. And as soon as the dates and everything is set, I'll circulate that around. And happy to answer any questions about those few things.
I missed the water webinar. How was that?
Oh, it's good. And they're all recorded and they're online. And I took some screenshots and I saw a couple of members of member of the ECAC of our Environment and Climate Action Committee has already been asking staff, do we have the data yet for Bowen? And they want to look into how we can prepare for water shortages and water intake and recharge of groundwater aquifers and all those things. So.
Thank you, Trustee Fest. Trustee Getty?
So the governance committee had a meeting earlier this week, and we finished up a legal opinion on something that was that needs to be reported to the trust council. And the rest is, we had finished a deep dive into the Section 3 mandate, the preserve and protect mandate, and we reported that out to trust council. So we're getting back into what are our priorities, what do we want to work on. I had tried to introduce at the governance committee having one or the other of us appointed to the finance advisory committee so that we can make sure that as they go through the budget line by line, that we're looking at Bowen's interests and whether or not it should be part of the calculation. I'm entitled as of right as the chair of the governance committee to be on the financial advisory. I had said at the beginning that vice chair of that committee wanted very much to be on the financial advisory, and it's fine. You know, you go ahead and go to a whole bunch of extra meetings. I don't necessarily need to, and I've changed my mind. I'm trying to get onto it, and there's some pushback. So now I have to get a deep dive into researching what or designate means, and I've done through Robert's Rules of Order and trying to figure out whether or not I can rescind that designation. We're also very much involved with the CAO has given his letter of resignation, and he's going to be retiring in June. So we've started up the whole process of doing an executive search. So that's been I'm meeting every 2 weeks on that hiring committee. And we've now finished a request for proposals to hire a consultant to help us with that whole process in terms of figuring out how to do the search and the kind of person we're looking for, the skill set and all of that. So that's the executive committee and the head of all the 4 standing committees and a representative from the Trust Conservancy. So that group is really working well and getting some stuff done. So that's just been posted. But that's going to be a little bit extra budget coming in for that work that's going to have to be done we're probably going, the deadline is the 1st of July, and we're probably not going to be able to finish the hiring process. And so we're also looking at interim. And that is something else that we're going to have to sort out between now and then, but it's moving. So we've got a Trusts Council meeting coming up the second week of March, I believe, and that's going to be in Nanaimo. And a former trustee from Bowen Island has become a member of the APC of North Pender. Once we had our meeting over there, he showed up and redeveloped an interest, so he's
That's Rob?
yeah,
Bob
Botterill. And he's going to be coming to Nanaimo to give us a presentation, a delegation on his work as a lawyer, has been on reconciliation, working with a variety of First Nations groups. And so report back on that. Thank you.
Just to add to that, I'm pretty sure that the increased recruitment cost to hire a new CAO is in the budget currently.
Okay.
And at least that's what Julia says here. And I just point everybody to 12.15 on our agenda is the Islands Trust Conservancy's highlights. If you want more info, and there's good links in there, if you want more info about what the Islands Trust Conservancy has been up to.
Thank you. Thank you for coming back to us with that budget information rationale. That's helpful. Moving on to item 13, question period. So question period is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions. I don't see anybody online. I'll look to our packed gallery here to see if there's any questions. All right. Seeing none, we're on item 14, a motion to adjourn. Councillor Wake, because he didn't get it. Seconded by Councillor Morris. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Audio
Aye.
not muted.
And that carries unanimously. So
You should have asked the question. The public would have been happy to know you sat here the whole time.
You can hear my voice, maybe.
Yeah.
take about a 10-minute walk around and then reconvene.